Man, I want to thank you for being a part of this conversation that myself and four other pastor friends are having. I also want to thank Chris Cox and Nate Click. He has done a lot of work, both of those guys, just to make this happen. My name is Jeremy Rands, and I have the privilege to pastor Monclova Road Baptist Church. And it's been several months now in conversation that this has come about. I have a pastor friend, Harley Snode, pastors in Worcester, Ohio. He contacted me and mentioned to me that he just felt that there's pastors that are struggling specifically because of COVID. At the time, we weren't meeting in buildings. Pastors from across the country, different states were dealing with different issues. There was a loneliness that pastors were having. We were seeing some alarming statistics that large percentage of pastors were going to end their ministry. Some were even taking their life. Marriages were hurt, and relationships just were broken. And we just felt like the work of the Lord is too important for us to just sit by and not do something about this. And so through prayer and then through some private conversations with Pastor Snode and I, we reached out to some of our circle of influence, some of our friends. And they're going to take a moment here and introduce themselves. But we just began to plan and put together a conversation that we hope is going to encourage our fellow pastors. Now, these pastors are from all across the country, so it's not just a single state. We wanted to get pastors from all over so we could see the effects of COVID, just the effects of what's happening around our country. And so let's get right into this conversation. And men, I want to thank you for being a part of this, and I want to thank you for all the time that you've put into this. So I want to invite you to sit back and listen as we five guys discuss a multitude of topics here, and I hope and pray it's going to be a blessing to you.
All right, as we begin our conversation, we're just going to go back over some of the things that we've talked about the last few weeks. I'm Chris Cox, and I am an assistant pastor at Monclova Road Baptist Church, and I'll be facilitating this conversation and just kind of asking questions of these five pastors that have been together and talking. And one of the things that we discovered is that COVID did not necessarily bring on new issues. It just revealed issues that were already there under the surface. And so one of the questions I want to have you guys talk about is, as a pastor, you have experienced some emotional struggles, or maybe you know guys who have experienced emotional struggles in ministry. How does a pastor address the emotional struggles that they're having, despite the shame and guilt that are often associated with those emotional issues that they're having?
So I became pastor almost 7 years ago, starting as interim and then got voted in. And, for me, my whole identity, really my whole ministry, had been wrapped up in results and wrapped up in performance and wrapped up in big days and special events and always hitting a new attendance level and all these things that are all too easy for us to fall into. And then we go through a pastoral transition, and our numbers changed dramatically, but it changed in a way that I had never planned on before. And so we lost over 250 people in this pastoral transition. And so I had 17% that voted no and 83% voted yes. And the no's were pretty anxious to leave. But when they started leaving, I just started crumbling internally. And rather than, I went for a year and a half, just taking it on, not seeking help, not getting any help. And I'm just cratering on the inside. And my identity is not wrapped up in Jesus Christ. My identity was wrapped up in what I was doing, or in this case, what was not happening. And so for me, that really just, it led to a point that even how I was leading the staff was beginning to struggle and suffer, because when you're in this state, you don't have much vision to offer anybody because you're crumbling internally. And for me, it really just, it reached a peak where, for me, I finally reached out to several different resources to help overcome some of the issues. And one was getting a coach, a person that I didn't even have a relationship with. They were able to step from the outside looking in and give me some practical things. There was a person that I reached out to mentor me, and they knew everything about our church and everything about me. And that brought a different perspective. So you need somebody from the outside that maybe doesn't know a whole lot. You need somebody from the inside that knows a whole lot. And then for me, I had to step back and do something that should have been done years earlier, but I had never slowed down. I was always, I was always known as the guy that produced the most, worked the hardest. And again, that was an unhealthy place to find myself in. And so it literally, I had walled myself off from everyone. So that's where my journey led to start getting some help. That's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this, because I suspect that there's other guys that have struggled with the same thing that I struggle with and still struggle with. I'm recovering. I haven't recovered. I'm recovering.
Amen. That's good. Thank you for sharing that.
Robby, how you said you're recovering. What are some things that you're doing? I know you said you got a mentor. What's the first thing if a guy right now feels like he's drowning and he heard what you just said and he's identifying with that? What's the first thing he ought to do?
I think the first thing you have to do is you've got to stop everything. You've got to get all the clutter and all the distractions out of your life. And this is going to be so counterintuitive to what most of us think. But the best thing that I ever did was literally, I left town for a week. I didn't take my wife. I didn't take anybody because I wasn't in the condition at that point to even be able to minister to my family. I needed to get away and get some sleep. And I mean, and I'm talking about getting away, maybe it's a lake, maybe it's the mountains, maybe it's the beach, where is irrelevant, but finding some place that you can decompress and get out of the fray. And for me, I brought in a guest speaker. So literally that I didn't even have to study that week. Like I knew that Sunday was covered, and I slept and slept a lot. I was just exhausted. Being able to do that allowed me to come back and then start building a plan. I think here's the thing we have to realize. We are so busy watching out for the church that we fail to realize that no one's going to watch out for us if we don't do it. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, our staff love us, our deacons love us, our church loves us. But at the end of the day, to a certain extent, what they would all say is, Pastor, you're doing too much. You need to slow down. And then they would put PS, just make sure that you don't ignore me. And that's human nature. That's not because it's bad. That's just human nature. I think we have to take responsibility of, guys, yes, some things are going to slide this week and some appointments are going to get canceled and people are going to be aggravated. But where is this church? Not built on us, but from a human standpoint, where is church going to be if we crumble and fall? It's going to be a lot worse than it is in the current state.
That's good. Hey, Jon, could you speak into that some, Jon?
Okay, so I hear Robby, and I think we all resonate. And I know there are men, maybe husbands and wives watching this, and you feel that. Do you remember, I'm thinking of the disciples after they go out on their missions trip and they come back, and Christ pulled them aside to have some self-care. And self-care is a word that is becoming very in vogue today. And I still put us in the younger generations of pastors still, who have watched those ahead of us literally burn out and burn up. And so I do think there is a sense in which self-care is massively important. It was important for the disciples, and Christ recognized you need to pull aside and rest. And I think we have to separate the stigma with, I just took a day off, or I took a week off. Yeah. And I know Christ did with his men as well. So I think it's important for us to hear that. And I think all of us are trying to practice that. And that would be our encouragement for guys. The disciples, Christ did with his disciples. He had times, Paul, when he got done with the end of his trip, I mean, although not much is written about it, but between the two mission trips, you just wonder, what did he do? Between 1 and 2 and 3, did he, was he out pounding doors again, or was he? There has to be a time for us to come up for air at some point, and we don't hear much about that because we feel like the time is short and the harvest is plenteous and the labors are few, so we better get out into the harvest and recognizing that there are rhythms of life that we have to practice if we're going to continue long.
There was a season in my ministry where I watched some others and learned from some others and was given some influences and some books on the topic of having a healthy soul. And it wasn't something that I had thought of during my Bible college training or maybe my 20s, but I figured out that if we want to be fruitful and faithful until the finish line, there's going to be some backstage, as one author called it, some backstage maintenance that needs to be done in our lives. And it certainly includes our walk with God, but it includes more than that. So I really appreciate some of those influences. And I think we have to resist the pride that says, I need to be the one with the answers. And we need to be okay with sometimes being the one with the questions, and look for those influences and look for the help that we need to have a healthy soul and to be healthy in the backstage environment. I also discovered, as a result of watching some others and learning from some others, that isolation is our enemy. And we tend toward isolation when we're real busy and when we're real active and when we have a lot of responsibility and are on platforms or podiums a lot. That isolation is not good for us. It will create an unhealthy situation that is really unsustainable for us, because that's not how God designed us to operate. Someone says, a pastor that I know and whose podcast I occasionally listen to, said, people would rather follow a leader who's always real than one who's always right. And I think that goes to this mental shift that we need to have, that puts us in a situation where we're okay to turn off the switch on being a mentor and go find a mentor, turn off the switch on investing in people and be invested in, and so forth.
Tim, can I just speak to something that you mentioned? Because this is so good, what you said. So when I finally went to my executive pastor and went to my staff and just said, I am struggling, I am crumbling, they all basically looked at me and go, good, you finally figured it out. Like, we've already seen this for months. They already saw it. They already knew it. And it was so sometimes I think we get so busy that we don't take time to, even amongst our staff or our deacons, to allow them to ask the tough questions that sometimes they're not going to be pleasant to hear, but they're so needed.
Yeah, it's good. Tim, you talked about pride. Wouldn't we all agree that that's more of a component here than we're willing to admit, because we're the face of the organization, or we're the one that should have it together. When I hear that verse, pride comes before a fall, I don't think of pastoral burnout, to be honest with you. That's not like at the forefront of my mind. Pride, I think of other manifestations of pride, but not the pastor who won't admit they need rest, or need renewal. I work in the counseling realm just a little bit as well. And I was reading a study recently that said they were talking about depression and anxiety, and Jeremy and I talked about this a few months ago, that medical treatment of depression and anxiety is no more effective than talk therapy. So someone saying I'm depressed or I'm anxious or I'm burnt out actually is just as effective to talk out loud about it humbly as to go on a med. Not that meds don't have a place in some settings, but a lot of us would rather take the meds because we can keep our pride intact privately while we do that. And I think that's what we're struggling with. We don't have a safe space to go and talk about it, or we haven't created that. And that's what this 5, I think, has done for me. It's been good for me. Is it's a place I can go talk and think out loud and be honest and humble. And I think we need more of that at the upper levels of ministry, humbleness and openness with other folks.
Anybody have any other thoughts before we move on to our next question for you? All right. So kind of along that same line of being, seeing within yourself some issues and problems. One of the things that you all have talked about was that oftentimes when you do isolate yourself, that then the person who hears all of the complaints and problems and difficulties and struggles that you're going through is your spouse. So what do you think are some of the biggest challenges to a pastor's marriage right now? And how do you suggest that somebody address some of those issues so that they do maintain and keep a healthy husband-wife relationship?
Chris, my parents were in the ministry. My dad planted churches. I grew up thinking that every couple of years you move and you start over. My dad just started churches in many different states and was a part of that process. And I don't think he ever realized what that does to a family, and what it really does to his health as well. I don't have good memories of my dad growing up. Like, I really, really want them. I don't have them. Now, I have memories with my dad at church, and those are good memories. But all of my memories growing up, they're always at church. There were, I could tell you every crevice in a building, every hiding spot. We lived there. And my dad was a workaholic. My dad died at 55. He had a heart attack. I've watched my mom from over the last 13 years now. She's been alone for the last 13 years at a very young age. I saw what it did to her financially. And I would say we had a good home life. But looking back now, I don't know if I could say it was a healthy home life. My dad taught me a love for the ministry, and he taught me a work ethic. But I think looking back now, it was very unhealthy. I've talked about this quite a bit because I don't want guys in ministry to think that that's normal and that's healthy. Because of that, it brought insecurities in my own life. And then I started having kids, got married, started having kids, and thought I had to work through just that whole overwork. And my wife said to me one time early in ministry, she said, I was trying to call you today, and it just kept going to your voicemail. And this was a pattern. She was just being very nice to me. And I said, well, I've been busy. I was in meetings all day. And we're sitting there at dinner, and my phone rang, and I answered it. And she said, she let me take the call, and it was all done. It hurt her. She said, so let me get this straight. If I need you during the day and you're with someone, I can't get you. But when I have you at night and they need you, they can always get you. She said, so I'm not important to you. And it wasn't that my wife was being whiny, and it wasn't that she was being high maintenance. She was revealing something that I needed to hear. your marriage is the most important part. Your family is the most important part. And I would say do everything you possibly can to keep your marriage fresh. I know pastors, their marriages are broken. They're divorced. Some are in jail. Tragedies. Their children suffer. And it's because we just didn't put the time necessary in developing that relationship. The truth is, for me, the most important relationship in my life is my wife. And I can say that, and then I can make her believe it by behaving that way. We just do things on purpose now. Every Wednesday night after a midweek service, we go on a date without fail. It's a date night, and nothing gets in the way of our date night. My wife, we deal with a lot of pastors' wives and pastors. We on purpose do things to try to encourage pastors' wives and marriages. We started just having a couple times a year a pastor and wife retreat, just hosting them, taking care of everything. And one of the things my wife hears so often is my husband just will never put his phone down. At night, you're laying in bed with your phone. In the morning, the first thing you look at is your phone. You're on the phone when you're in your car. And it just says to your wife, and this is what wives are telling my wife, it just says to me that whatever is on the other side of that is more important than me. And they know that's unhealthy. And so I just think that our kids, I've got a 20-year-old who just turned 20 yesterday, and my oldest daughter's graduating from high school this year. And being with them in the important parts and having conversations with them, they grow up so fast, and they're making decisions on their careers in college, and they only get one dad. And you could be a great pastor and a lousy father. I say this, and it's my dad, so I can say this about him. And he's in heaven now, so he knows the truth. My dad was he was a great pastor. He was a lousy dad, and at 44, I still suffer from that. And his anniversary was of his death was September 30th. And I still struggle with bitterness toward him. I want to be the guy that goes to his grave and tells him how much I miss him, and I do miss him. But I'm the guy that also says, "Dad, you did this to yourself, and you did this to your family." And so I just want to encourage you, men that are listening to this. Proper care for yourself is being healthy so you could be properly caring for a wife and children that God has given you. And he didn't make a mistake when he gave your wife to you. And he didn't make a mistake when he gave your kids to you. And you have exactly what they need for them to be what God wants them to be.
So any of you have any thoughts on a pastor that this is triggering in him that his marriage is not healthy? What are some steps he can do to take steps forward to get out of that, seeking counsel, things like that? What's some advice that you might have for them?
I shared, we were talking about this the other day, but I think for a lot of guys, first is just admitting it, and I think one of the best ways to gauge how healthy your relationship with your wife is I mentioned that, not original with me, but somebody said the best judge of a man's ministry is how his wife looks at him. How does, to us here in this call, as well as those that will watch this, how does your wife respond to you? Not just the surfacey pastoral pastor wife way, but in authentic moments, what's in her face, what's in her heart. And if you can't see that, guys, as I've tried to do, I usually do it on vacation. That seems to be our rhythm, where I ask my wife, how are we doing? and we'll go out for a few nights. The boys will do their thing while we're on vacation. And also, what dreams do you have? What do you want to do in the next year? And if she can't share that or doesn't feel like I care, that concerns me. We're fine, or no, nothing on the horizon. How open is your wife? I heard someone say your wife is like a flower, like she opens up to you. But if you close her off, it's very hard to get her to open again. And I guess maybe that would be the question, is how open is your wife with you? How frequently, how vulnerable is she with you? And if you can't remember the last time, that's probably where you need to start, is let her say why she can't be open. And I think what Jeremy said with the phone, that's convicting, I'm sure, to all of us. We're more accessible now than ever. It's so hard to have boundaries, but we have to. And so that would be my thought, Chris, is just, I think first just admitting it, and then asking your wife what would help. What can I do? And then when she gets done, then say to her, and what else? That's a magic question with your wife. She gets done, and then you say, and what else? That'll open up the petals of that flower, her heart, in ways that nothing else will, because you're not just trying to fix it. You want to hear her. You want to connect with her. You want to honor the Lord toward her, be Christ to her, as her husband. So that's maybe a little more philosophical, but I think there are practical steps connected to that. So, John, I don't know if you want to chime back in or not.
Okay. Going straight to the bottom shelf, just down on the pavement with the people. My phone communicates with my watch. So whenever my wife and I are out, she said the other day, I wish you would quit looking at your watch all the time. And I couldn't understand what she was saying. But now, so we have, our bios are in college. Our fosters are still in school. So we pay for a babysitter every Friday for lunch. We go out, and I refuse to wear my watch on the times where we go out with her. Just a simple, small thing, because I am so prone to look at it because it vibrates. So that is just a simple thing that I think it could be a help, and it certainly is seeming to help us.
It's good.
I'd just add to it. I think for me, there was a couple of things that I fundamentally did not understand. I think, first of all, most of us, the environment that we grew up in, we were taught to burn out for Jesus. And so while it was never said, the heroes that many of us had were workaholics that regularly preach things like Satan never takes a day off through the week, so I'm not going to take a day off, like Satan's our example. And so we ingrained in us, really from our Bible college days, or even for some of us that answered the call to ministry in high school, just from an early age all the way up, we get this mindset of what a pastor ought to be and what his schedule ought to be. And then I think then you combine that with the fact of I don't remember anybody at any point in my ministry for whatever role. And I mean, I served as a children's pastor. I've served as an executive pastor. I've served as a senior pastor. No one ever taught me that those different roles have just those three roles, for example, have very distinct work schedules, workflow commitments, and just learning how to, this is being blunt, but how to manage our time. And so I was not a good time manager, and I needed a mentor that really, and a coach that poured into me, that started out. Jeremy can probably relate to this because we both were executive pastors before we stepped into this role. Well, I was trying to lead my team as a senior pastor in the same way that the executive pastor would, and that doesn't work. That is not a good combination at all, but no one taught me that. I never had that in Bible college. I never heard that in graduate level work. I never heard any of that. Getting somebody that is successful, and when I say successful, I'm talking about their family is intact, they've got a healthy family, a healthy ministry, for me, one of the things I really wasn't interested, this is just me, I wasn't interested in hearing some guy that had pastored for 3 years at such and such church, his great philosophy on how to manage time. I wanted to see a guy that had been 25 years at a church and had walked through it and still had his family and still had a healthy life and all that. And so, boy, when my coach got a hold of me and looked at my calendar for the week, like, once we got the ministry calendar under control, that gave me the freedom that I felt like I did not have before. I mean, I can remember going out. I love yard work and landscaping, and that's my hobby. Love ride my motorcycle. I can remember doing those things and literally feeling guilty to get on the motorcycle and go for a ride because there's all these different ministry things. And the problem was I was scheduling everything in ministry, but I was not scheduling anything for me. I was not scheduling anything for my family. I was not scheduling things that mattered, all this other minutia. And so, boy, when someone got a hold of me and then just learning really what my main key areas, that as a senior pastor that I have to do that nobody else can do, that are going to be totally different than what my executive pastor or student pastor, music pastor, small group pastor, all those different positions are going to have different time commitments and different descriptions. I didn't understand that.
Can I say one more thing and then we can move on? If you want a good marriage so other people can think you have a good marriage, you want a good marriage for the wrong reasons. You should want a godly marriage because God gave you a life. And whether you're in the ministry or not, you ought to strive to have a godly marriage. And if you think, well, it'll give me a better platform, it'll help my church grow, people respect me more, you're doing it for the wrong reason, and your wife will figure that out. Just simply do it because you love her. Be a good husband because it's the right thing to do, and invest in her life, and make her life the best it could ever be because God put her with you. And that's the only reason. And then all the things that we want will come. But if for the right motive.
Jeremy, what do you say too? Like I hear often, your kids are only with you. I think you said it maybe last time we talked for 25 years of your marriage. You spend more years in marriage without your kids than you do with. A lot of us, if we would be out of the ministry, at least in a full-time capacity, what marriage is left? There's more to our lives and our marriage than just we do ministry together. And for that to be vibrant means that it has to, I think that's a great point with the motives. Our wives, they can see a motive a mile away. They may not say anything, but they see that when we're just going through the motions. There's a marriage conference or couples renewing of vows or whatever. We do the superficial. What do we do when no one's looking, when no one knows but her and the Lord? Like what's in the last week, what has been in my life that would be in that category? That's convicting to me.
Tim, what are you doing with your wife to stay in love with her?
Time. And that's the only thing we have that means so. And it's the greatest thing we can give is our time. And I heard someone say yesterday, I think, and I hear this coming from what Jeremy shared and from what you shared, Jon, about your watch. The person said, be wherever your feet are. Someone else might call that being fully present. And that's the battle we need to fight in this connected age. That's what our wife needs, is what our kids need. So
yeah, that's good. That's a good word.
Don't feel guilty spoiling your wife.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you do, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Like, she is your treasure. Treat her like that. Spoil her rotten. What are you afraid of?
Right.
And wouldn't you say too, in some ways, that's even if you're thinking pragmatically, which you should not be, you should be principle oriented. But what is the best thing for a church that wife does feel like she's treasured by her husband? My wife, I don't, and I'm not good at a lot of things, but I have tried to not tell my wife you have to do anything in the church. I just let the Spirit lead her. And if she's excited about our marriage and our home, she's naturally gravitating toward the things that God has gifted her to do. She's doing them better. She's doing them with all of her heart. So, even if you're thinking from that mindset, Jeremy, it's in the best interest of the church that the wife feels that way as well. It's good all around. God blesses all of that,
I think including her too. I think something I was guilty of. So for the most part, I've not been guilty of bringing all the junk home for ministry. Like I've done pretty good with that. But something big would happen, and I would go run tell 5 staff members this awesome thing that happened. Well, by the time I shared it with 5 staff members, the emotional high was gone. I'd done blocked it out and not thought another thing about it. I get home, I don't even tell my wife. I mentioned nothing about it. And then a week later, she's having a conversation with somebody, and she's like, "We got a $50,000 check at church, and you didn't even come home and share that?" And I'm like, "Well, I shared it with 5 other people." I mean, those are the type things that I've tried to. Okay, this is a great thing. I want to share this. I want to save this for Heather before I share it with anybody else. And I think that includes them and makes them feel a partner in ministry instead of just somebody that's stuck along for the ride.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it.
Hey, just before we move on, I don't want to belabor it. I remember early on in the marriage, my wife said, "I feel like everybody knows more about your life than I do." And one of the things we started probably 25 years ago was every day at the end of the day, we have a debrief, she and I. We sit down somewhere and I just kind of run through a bullet point. Okay, this happened and this happened and this happened. Just big picture items. And then like Robby was saying, then she feels connected. She feels like then she knows me. She knows what's going on. And that has been something that we still practice to this night. Just a quick debrief.
Yeah, can I add something too? Sorry, I know don't we get numb relationally? Like I can't have a conversation with anybody after some days. I don't know if you guys are that way, and Heidi can feel that. She's trying to connect and I'm just numb, relationally. We've got to save space to connect with her on that. That's a great practical. I love that, Jon. That's something I'm going to implement. That's good.
And as we move on, I think one of the things that people who are watching this see is that there's 5 guys here who seem to have a really good relationship. And I can say from watching the very beginning of this that 5 guys came together and really didn't know each other. And so as we have seen this group grow together and closer, what do you guys think are some ways that a pastor can build or maintain some meaningful friendships, either inside the church or outside the church, so that they too could have something like this in their life?
Jeremy, I had made in my notes with this question. I don't know if you remember, you talked about, you kind of divulged to us, this is something I'm not real good at, which I'm with you on that. I don't know if you'd mind speaking to that. I thought some of what you said last time and maybe even today on what you're working through on that front, the peer.
Yeah. Part of my problem is I don't want to bother anybody. I'm a giver. So if you need something and you ask me, I will bend over backwards. I'll give everything. I'll do whatever I can to help you. But to reach out and ask for help, again, probably a lot of my upbringing. I hope it's not pride, but I was convicted. I think it was Tim that just talked about pride a little bit. I'm sure it is, but I think it also is just some insecurities as well. I wonder, does anybody really want to invest? I think Satan, he can really discourage you in this area. You know you're called to do what you're doing, so just suck it up. And if you're lacking, you must have a problem. I struggle with that. I know guys care, because whenever I do reach out there, they're always there. But I don't like to bother guys. And because of that, it's been detrimental to building friendships. And then you just get too busy. By the end of the day, you've been busy, and you say, well, tomorrow's a new day. Maybe tomorrow I'll do it. I think guys struggle with, and I guess I'll just use me. Just once people find out the real you, are they going to like the real you? Do you have anything to offer guys? I think the prideful guy says, oh yeah, I've got all kinds of things to offer. But I think just because you're a pastor, I said this earlier, I think it doesn't mean you're type A and that you have all the answers. And we're humans, and we struggle, and we have upbringings, and we have families, and we have struggles and trials. I know all of my weaknesses. I think Satan exploits a lot of those. I know what they are, and I don't want anybody else to know what they are. And so I try to, if I can just help you and minister to you, then I don't have to get close and let you in, and then you find something that you don't like.
Good. I was in John 13 where Peter's resisting Christ washing his feet, and I was just struck by, it's harder for me. I don't know if you guys are this way. It's harder. It takes more humility on my part to let somebody help me than for me to help somebody else. And I'm talking a down and out, body odor, financially devastated, drunk, whatever specific scenario you can think of. It takes less humility for me to help them than to have a peer, somebody that I let them wash my feet, if you will, whatever the specific thing is. And that is, I think, in my life, Jeremy, I'm not saying it is in yours, but in mine, God convicted, it is pride, and if I could get helped and still look perfect while doing so, I probably would get help more often. But to get help, you have to admit you need it. And that means you have to share what you're struggling with. And that's, for our male ego, we'd rather die trying to do it on our own than have to be open and vulnerable and get the help that we need, and that's convicting.
I remember the first time that, go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
I'd like to suggest that we are designed for relationships, and isolation is unhealthy. And one of the reasons we'll have that opportunity to get the help we need when we need it is because there has been a relationship built. Reaching out to someone who I haven't spoken to in 18 months, who I think maybe could help me, is not going to be as likely as reaching out to someone who I had a meal with 3 weeks ago, who I know cares about me and I've spent some time with. So I think an ounce of prevention for us is that we build those relationships even when our lives aren't screaming at us that we need them. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to become convinced that we were built for relationships. We become convinced that we need one-on-one relationships. And so we put those things in our budget and on our calendar because we're going to need that. Just like you might take a vitamin that helps you, or just like you might ingest something into your body that might fuel you. So most of us eat 2 or 3 meals a day. Those don't have to be alone. And so I would suggest that both in our church and outside of our church, we need to lean in to scheduling some appointments with people that we share a meal with. And then as we do that, both inside our church and outside our church, we look for those people. It might be 10% of the people that we share a meal with. We look for those people. Usually it's going to be another man who is life-giving. And I think the two traits would be that they have some road under them and behind them, and they care about you, and you think they might be a resource. So then you lean into that, either on the phone or in person, and then you see that wisdom and that care, and it's someone you think you could trust if you were honest with them, someone whose walk spiritually you respect, and then you can build on that. And I think sometimes that's an ounce of prevention maybe that's needed in our lives.
Very good. That's good.
Robby, did you have something that you were going to?
Yeah, I would just say, it's very similar to what was just said, but I know for me, getting to the place, and we all struggle with pride. I still struggle with pride, but humbling myself to be able to call someone and say, look, we've met, we don't know each other very well, but it seems like we have a lot in common. And I would really like to build a friendship with you. There is something in our culture today, male friendships it's not understood. It's not practiced. There are so few guys that truly have another friend that they could look at and say, this is a Jonathan David friendship. And that will not happen accidentally 99% of the time. It's going to be intentional. And, then just being willing to be totally vulnerable and real. I mean, I think when we call other pastors, we have a tendency we just want to put the best side of what's going on. And we all have a rough side. I mean, we've tore it up financially this year, and now we've not made budget in 6 weeks in a row. And it's like, what happened here? It's hard to say that sometimes because if our identity is not in Jesus Christ, we fall back in my friend or my soon-to-be friend or the person I want to engage with as a friend is going to think less of me, which is what you already mentioned, because my performance is not up to where it needs to be. And that's where I think having our relationship in Jesus Christ, everything's grounded in him, and then just being real. There are none of us that pastor perfect churches, and there are no perfect pastors.
Good. It's good.
If anybody doesn't have any other thoughts, the next topic that I'd like to have you guys speak into is that this year, I think, as when you first got together, was pretty tumultuous. And now there seems to be, as you guys gather and talk, that there's a lot of hope and a lot of just life coming back to your ministries. So what are some practical things that you have done that would be life-giving practices that have helped you to renew physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, things that have helped you to keep fresh?
Well, if I could begin this, of all of the conversations we've had over the past months, I think we have had the most laughs about this part and probably some of the most encouraging, helpful dialogues, because like Robby reminded us, we were coached into not taking a day off. Go. You got one life to live. It will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. So I think some of the things that we have done to try to help, and I don't want to speak for the other guys. They all have their own little fun things, and I hope they will all share, is finding something that replenishes you. And we're all so different. And so for me, I live on the coast, and one of my replenishing things, I have really two things, and neither one of them are spiritual. And they're just so much fun. And I feel replenished is I will go to the beach and put out a chair, put my feet in the sand and watch the ocean and read a book. And and that is it. And I can sit out there for a couple hours and just be replenished. I would love to say it's all spiritual. I look at the ocean and I say, oh, my sins are out there somewhere. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's, dude, that guy's an amazing surfer. So for me, it has been a beach. And the other thing, which is so different, is on Sunday mornings to get up. Just God has been waking me up dark early and going for a ride rather than the sermon prep, before Sunday morning, all of the things I would need to. And I know that is just ridiculously counterintuitive. The word's already been used, but finding something for you. So I'm speaking for me. I like drives. I have a convertible car. I love to drive with the top down and just get out, look at the stars. That is how I care and replenish what's mine. So that's me. There are other worser ideas, and you're going to hear them now. So
I could go if you want while you're waiting. For me, this is going to sound really cheesy too. This is where all of us kind of smirk as we say it. This is us trying to be vulnerable. There's a podcast called How I Built This by NPR. It's basically all of the companies you've heard of or haven't heard of, their founders, they're interviewed. And because I'm a church planner, it's so therapeutic to commiserate with those early phases of how they started their business, lost it all, whatever. So I typically, my day off, I'll spend, leisure, but also maybe getting a few things done, and I'll work manually while listening to that. It's just me. I'm an introvert. I've heard people say introverts replenish when they're away from people. We talked about isolation. That's not what I'm alluding to. But Jon, with his feet in the sand, the top down, which by the way doesn't work in Ohio in January for the record, but and then extroverts, they replenish when they're around people. For me, it's by myself. In a productive way. And so that's something I do. I listen to those episodes regularly. It's not a spiritual podcast. It's just an entertaining thing. And so that'd be one thing that really helps me. And then golfing with my boys. We talked about golf. I think Tim might bring that up as well. But going with my two teenage sons, just golfing, it fixes everything. I don't know. It just does inside of me. So those would be a couple things for me.
Is that because you beat them?
No, actually not. Yeah. No, that doesn't happen now. So
wow.
Thank you for reminding me of that, Jeremy.
I think hobbies are a category, and people are going to have different ones. For me, it's boating, but that's kind of 4 months a year, so the other 8 months there needs to be other stuff for me because of where we live. But I love boating. And then, of course, family time is a big part of it. I try to listen to encouraging podcasts a couple a week. I think positivity is contagious. And I think we need to be really careful about what we're giving our ears and heart and mind to. I think if you saturate your life with cable news or social media, you shouldn't be surprised when you're a frustrated individual without a lot of hope. So I think those influences, podcasts, and then just time with people who are life-giving, whether it's a meal or something of that nature.
I love to read, so every week I'm buying a couple new books, and we're in Ohio, so we don't get the ocean in the view, but it's Toledo, so we get trash heaps and those types of things. My youngest daughter, gets so excited every Sunday morning. She wants to go to church with me, and she wants me to take her to Starbucks, and she wants a drink. She's 9. It's actually something I look forward to now. If she doesn't ask me the night before, and it's always, and can I sit in the front? That was a big deal to her as soon as she was able to start sitting in the front seat of my truck. And she'll just talk, and she'll get on my phone on the way there, and she'll, want to order the biggest girl drink, that she can. And then we have to get it without coffee. And Just listening to her talk about her life at 9 years old. I love it. It's something I look forward to every week. Matter of fact, this week I was sick and had to quarantine in my basement, and I missed just being with her and listening to her life. Dating with my wife, I might have mentioned this a little bit ago. Just a date every week to know. That's when we just talk about life and we regroup, and we don't let her get more than a few days out. That if there's something wrong, something that needs to be fixed, something that's bothering her, we talk every week, and it's enjoyable just to hear life from people that you love and hear it from their viewpoint. That's refreshing to me. It's something I look forward to every week. And then golfing. I love to do that as well. I wish I could get better at it though.
Don't you do yard work, Robby? What do you replenish with?
Yeah, I love landscaping and yard work. And so for me, overseeing making sure the yard is perfect and pristine just rejuvenates me. You know, I can go out here and design the flower beds for the fall, and there's something life-giving about that. And then long rides, taking a motorcycle. I mean, my kids are getting older, and I'm thankful my son, who's almost 17, he's like, Dad, can we still go out on the bike? And that's cool. I like that. I want that, you know. And so just, finding those things, and then I think just intentionally planning them in. So at this day, at this time, we would never think of missing a funeral. We would say, no, that's priority. I have to be at the funeral. Well, we need to do the same thing with whether it's landscaping or golfing or, if I don't golf, so I'd have to go preach the next day to get over the nervousness of the golf game.
I think people need a shift. I know I have needed a shift and still working on it to realize that this isn't selfish, right, and to understand that we're going to be better on the other 6 days for having done this on the 1/7 of the time, to use the Sabbath ratio and principle. And it's not about doing less for Christ or something. It's about being better and healthier for having done what he taught us to do and patterned for us in the Word. So I think we really need to make sure we remember we have permission for that.
Mm-hmm. It's good.
All right, so our last question for you all, and it does particularly contain or pertain to this time period that we've gone through with COVID-19. What redemptive benefits are you seeing or observing that are coming out of the most recent challenges that you've had in ministry? How are you seeing that coming through this, you are stronger, your church is stronger, you're seeing people are stronger? What redemptive benefits are you seeing through this COVID-19 time?
Chris, if I can just chime in before we each maybe share something on that front for those tuning in today. One of the things that we have done these last couple of months is reach out to 5 to 10 of our preacher friends, each of us, and have just asked them how they're doing, which I think is something maybe for those tuning in to consider doing as well. So some of what we're going to share is our personal take on things possibly, but also just hearing, we have Robby who's in Texas, Tim who's in Michigan, Jon who's on the West Coast, Jeremy and I who are in different parts of Ohio. What are we hearing from guys either locally around us or even friends we have across the country? That I think these would be at least a decent cross sample. There's nothing scientific about this, but I do feel like we've gotten a pretty good sense of a wide, berth or range of guys in different contexts: church planners, long tenured pastors, church plants, urban, rural, different size ministries. So I'm interested to hear kind of what everybody's take is on that. But that's kind of the context of that question. Would not just be our own personal ministry, but also things we've heard elsewhere. So I guess whoever wants to start on that, but that kind of caveat.
I'll just mention quickly that we wanted to take advantage of the need for virtual ministry, but we immediately, I think, all sensed that is an insufficient substitute for incarnational or in-person ministry. And so we want to take advantage of that, but then also lean into using that as a bridge to do in-person ministry and cherishing in-person ministry that much more because of it having been taken away temporarily. So for me, that has been an important part of it. And also the idea that the decks were cleared and the canvas was made blank for us this spring. And we really had an opportunity to move forward with whether it's a program or doing things as they've always been done. We had an opportunity to shake that up and really be more intentional going forward.
That's good.
I think it's been wonderful. We took an extended vacation. We've always taken a family vacation each summer, but we took 4 weeks this year and just, had time together in a way that we normally, with not having vacation Bible school and camps and all the other things that are great things, but clutter up a church calendar that when you've got kids that are in all those, it's hard to take a prolonged vacation. It allowed us to do that this year. I think the other thing that's been good for us is, we've really marginal Christians that we all had that were attending our churches. This has really brought to the surface what people really are spiritually. And I think we've discovered who the real disciples are and who the spectators are. And I think it's been good for us as pastors. I know for our staff, this has been something that we've talked about is, as much as we want to reach people, let's make sure that we don't confuse the Great Commission, which was to make disciples. Let's don't confuse that with filling buildings, which is those of us that if we were filling buildings, well, that group's gone. They're long gone and may never be back. But the disciples are here. And so focusing on, I don't even look. I've just made myself, I don't even look at what we had a year ago because it's irrelevant. It doesn't even matter anymore. Like, not saying it's bad to track trends, but everything's new. So I don't even know. I don't even look at the sheet anymore because I'm focusing on what's here and truly making disciples. And I think that, just being able to hit that reset button of what's most important here. To me, I've enjoyed preaching more in the last 4 months since we've kind of come back than I've ever remembered enjoying preaching in my ministry.
Amen.
Good. That's a good word.
I think everyone had a period of dormancy where we had to quarantine or do virtual church. But from the men that we've talked to, it seems that there is a genuine appreciation for the church and a genuine love for what Christ loved and built and started and authored. And so because of that, it has allowed, like Robby has said, I think it's allowed us to enjoy the camaraderie every Sunday, to be able to worship together, to see family, to walk in. It has made Sundays less about a routine and more about a reunion. And that is the sense in which I think a lot of guys are encouraged. When we began this, we were months and months ago, I think all of us were sensitive that guys are going to bail and that we were hearing the worst. And I think many of the guys have encouraged themselves in the Lord and just what is true, what truly is church. So.
Yeah, that's good. I would add to that. I remember the first drive-in service that we did drive parking lot services for a while. Some of you are maybe still in that mode a little bit. I remember that first Sunday night, we were still doing live stream in the morning. just weeping, seeing your people. I'm doing church in the back of a trailer and we didn't do anything fancy. I had a guy with a guitar in the trailer with me and we just sang some basic songs, nothing fancy. And I just preached a very simple message from James 1. I remember that. But just that reunion, I think that's a good way of putting it, Jon. We have not gone back to the routine, and I'm praying that we can stay in that reunion mode. So I see that as a benefit. And then even just watching us do this today, would we be doing this today if we hadn't had COVID?
No.
I don't think we would. Not even because of the logistical things. I mean, I think it's made us more comfortable with this format, and it allows us to connect. We have no excuse now. I think that's what we're connecting all over the country right now today. And I think that bodes well for the future of some of us older guys. Jon, I would push back on the young blood a little bit, maybe for some other guys that are tuning in. But for me, I remember the first Zoom call I had, I was not real excited about it, to be honest with you. But I look forward to this today, and I look forward to what God is doing through this. So to what Tim said, I think there are new things we can't leave what we've had, but we're pivoting. I played basketball, keep your pivot foot, but then, pivot, navigate what's thrown at you and adjust. And I see a lot of churches doing that. And for me, even our older people, they're open to those pivots in ways. And I'm not knocking the older folks, but folks that have done it one way, they're more flexible, because we have to be at this point. And so I think that's been a really redemptive gift that I see as well. As we finish today, I hope that you're getting to know us and kind of see what God's doing in Jon and Robby and Tim and Jeremy and his staff and church as well. That maybe the Spirit of God is stirring in you today about the need that you have, that we have recognized we have for connection, for encouragement, for edification in a very real and solution-based way, not just talking philosophically, but practically and dealing with the nuts and bolts of what is the day-to-day of someone in ministry. And so I hope at least it's whet your appetite. As they say, we can't make you drink, but we're trying to whet your appetite today with what God is doing in our relationship with each other. And so I hope that you'll consider this question, who are my five? What group of five, whether it's five or whatever the number is, but that I can give life to others and others can invest in me in a way that allows me to serve the Lord the full length of time, the breadth of what God has for me. I just want to finish well. And I'm sure that these men, we all do. We want to finish well for the glory and honor of Jesus Christ and not prematurely take ourselves out or not reach out for the help that God has providentially put in our lives. You probably have friends right now. Some of these men I've known for years, others I've just gotten to know recently. But who is God laying on your heart? And who could you reach out to, as Robby said, and just humbly say, I want to build relationship and friendship with you. Tim mentioned, and I think it's worth bringing up, we were joking as we were doing the survey aspect of this, we're not Barna. We're just trying to be Barnabases. We're just trying to be consolers and comforters and encouragers. And what could God do with the church of Jesus Christ if the men leading it and serving it were healthy? I see God stirring right now in our church, and I'm sure these men could testify. Many of our young men and young people, the Spirit is really moving in them right now. And the church is poised, I believe, to do some great things in the days ahead if Christ tarries is coming. But are we who lead it, we who serve it, are we healthy and able to steward well that energy, that power, that work that God is doing in them? And so I'm excited to hear what God will do as you kind of process this conversation and then try to personalize it in your own space. And I just want to personally say thank you to the men on this call. And we're planning on meeting on a somewhat monthly basis and encouraging each other, and hope that this recording lights that same fire in your heart as well. And feel free as well. We'll have in some of the post-editing contact information if you'd like to reach out to us. All five of us have wanted to give out our email. And so if we can be of encouragement to you on how to start something like this or how we can personally encourage you, we would love to do that. But the beauty of the 5 model is that we don't have to help everybody. We just need to be a friend to a few that God gives us. And so we hope this will encourage you to be that as well to others. And the Lord bless you. Thanks for tuning in today. And if we can be of encouragement or help, please let us know.